It's Kevin Keatsman Uncanceled on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio.
Good morning, Kansas City. Welcome to Uncanceled on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. I'm Kevin Keatsman in the desert with the Kansas City Royals. We'll talk a little baseball on the show later today as we went to the game in Surprise, Arizona last night. It was a great night. A lot of home runs, a lot of scoring, a lot of fun. It was pup night. There were dogs everywhere. I mean, we were in heaven out here in the desert. It was a really nice 78-degree day and a pretty nice evening. Kind of a light hoodie weather evening at the ballpark last night. We'll get into some of that a little bit later on. We're going to spend some time talking about some news in the media today as we have outlets that have had to fact-check themselves after fact-checking Donald Trump. We got layoffs. We got late-night comedians changing their stripes. And we have Democrat politicians all of a sudden talking about the Republican Party and how on fire it is. We're actually seeing some people cross over, folks, at least to the middle, and understand, wow, we are not on the right side of the American public. It is fun to watch. But we will start today with a couple of local stories that I would put the headline on this. It was a weird one for me as I was getting ready for today's show. I worked for 10 years in the 90s at Channel 4. And one of the things that happens, a television newsroom in those days, I can't speak for today because we haven't seen the outcomes of like a lot of the young reporters and people in news that are there now. In those days, it was basically an incubator for people to become something much bigger and better doing something else. For example, I was the sports anchor on the weekends, and Harris Faulkner was the news anchor. Worked with Gary Lezak, who became a really huge deal. Initially, some of you may remember Dan Henry, what a great mentor he was for me, Phil Witt, Frank Bull. These were folks that were older than me that were great mentors, but there was a young group of talent there that went on to do incredible things. While he's older than me, Gordon Docking was in the sports department. He wound up being a CEO of a hospital, St. Joseph Health System. And we would watch people leave and get into other careers, and they would do really good things. We have two lawsuits in Kansas City right now with two pretty high-profile people that I worked with both of them at Channel 4 for years and years. In fact, became Kathy Nelson's neighbor later on, living in Lenexa. She's the executive director of the Kansas City Sports Commission and Foundation. When I worked at Channel 4, she was the Chyron operator. What a Chyron is the person who puts the graphics up on the screen. So if I popped up on set and, I was doing the sports or I was interviewing George Brett, it would say George Brett, at that time Royals first baseman, or Royals DH. She would put that up there. Then she went on to do all of the graphics for Royals telecasts because Channel 4 had those broadcasts. And she worked in the truck at the stadium and did so many things and got to know so many people with the Royals and in sports that's where she was going. She eventually became the executive director of the Sports Commission and Foundation. The other person that I worked closely with is exactly my age. His name is Chris Hernandez, and he was an excellent reporter, always trying to dig up stories, which was our generation of reporters. Journalism is not the same now. I was the guy on the staff that was always trying to hold people in sports accountable, especially people like owners, general managers, things like that. Of course, you didn't want the players dealing drugs in the Chiefs' locker room like Bam Morris did to Mark Vanover, and we'd report those stories. I'd be the only one to report those things. But mostly it was about accountability with taxpayer funds, money, issues that affect real folks and the sports team and holding powerful people accountable. That's what media used to be. That's exactly what media used to be. Chris Hernandez was great at that, not at sports, but at City Hall and around Kansas City. He did a lot of great stories through the years. Why do I bring these two names up? Well, they're both involved with lawsuits. And let's start first with Chris Hernandez as the hero of our story. Now, I haven't talked to Chris in years. I certainly enjoyed working with him. He left Channel 4 and went to work for Kansas City, Missouri. He loves Kansas City, Missouri. He wanted to do public service and became basically communications director for the city of Kansas City, Missouri. You'd recognize him if you saw him. When there was a fire, when something happened, when there was an event, he would be the spokesperson for the city. Think of the White House press secretary. That was Chris Hernandez for Kansas City, Missouri. And he did this for many, many, many years. And he was very good at it because he had an excellent journalism background. And we always thought of Chris Hernandez as fair and honest and upfront. Later in his career, in his 50s, he got sideways with city manager Brian Platt and the administration at City Hall because they were asking him now to lie to the media, which is lying to the public. And after this happened for a while, he wouldn't stand for it anymore. And he wound up getting basically demoted, stayed with the city, sent to another position, no possible chance of advancement. And he said, to heck with this, and his reporter skills kicked in from his days at Channel 4. And he said, you know what? There's no difference between a reporter from then, the 90s, when we were doing what we did. There's really no difference in the work that we were doing trying to find these things with people in power and him being on the inside working for the city with people of power. And we point this out because a jury has decided that Chris Hernandez is the hero of the story, that he's the good guy, that he's the regular guy that went to work for the city, witnessed the corruption, witnessed the fake identity of the people who lead in our community, and he turned whistleblower. And he came forward and he filed a lawsuit, and a jury awarded him $928,000 yesterday, nearly $1 million, because the people at the city were telling him, as the communications director, to lie to the media, therefore lying to the public. There can be no public trust when you know your government's corrupt. DOGE is doing this on a massive scale. Chris Hernandez, in his way in Kansas City, did it in his own way by saying, this isn't right. What they're asking me to do is bad business. The city's learned a lesson. It's not $100 million, but it's a solid lesson. He got his back pay, which I think was $228,000 for the years that he has not worked. And then he got $700,000 essentially in damages. I think that's a legitimate lawsuit. I think that is as good a reason to sue an entity or a government or Brian Platt or anybody with the city as any reason I can think of. If you're on the inside and you know the government is lying to the public and lying to the media, you come forward. Blow that whistle and sue their pants off. That's holding them accountable. I'm proud of my generation. I have a lot of younger people in media now that will poke fun at me or look at people of my age. There's a lot of ageism in America, and I'm not really there yet. People really like to make fun of people in their 70s and 80s. So I'm not really there yet, but there's plenty of people that look at me and go, oh, yeah, you're the old guy. Yeah. We did it right. We knew up from down. We worked our asses off. We worked really, really long hours, hard hours for very little money. That Channel 4 newsroom was loaded with young talent and tremendous mentors of people that understood journalism. Most of that generation was forged by the Watergate journalism, which we can look back on differently now than we did then, but it still was holding people in power accountable. It was the same thing. Chris Hernandez won't get a lot of headlines here other than the final suit, whatever. They'll probably appeal it. But it takes some stones. It takes some guts, and I'm proud of him. That's my generation of people, and the folks that worked at Channel 4 back in the day were awesome. Kathy Nelson was also awesome. And we have a separate lawsuit now. A man named James Lemons was at the Chiefs parade after the Super Bowl a year ago, where 23 people were injured when there was a mass shooting. One died. James Lemons was shot at that event. He has now filed a lawsuit because the parade was not safe, and he does not believe enough precautions were taken to provide security. There was a failure, and there was no conduct beforehand to prepare for such a plan. It sounds like a legitimate lawsuit to me until you learn he's suing the Kansas City Sports Commission and Foundation. And at the top of that foundation is Kathy Nelson. I got a lot of criticisms of the Kansas City Sports Commission. Not really any of those are hers. It's basically the structure of the organization, that the most powerful people in Kansas City own and operate a charity called the Kansas City Sports Commission, sit on a massive board and control everything. And Kathy is such a wonderful person, such a great lady and professional business person that she handles this very, very well. But it must be very tiresome for her to listen to the most powerful people in the city say, we need to do it this way and this way and this way. And she implements it, and she navigates all the stupid, silly little potholes in Kansas City, no pun intended, because this ain't no easy city to be dealing with all these powerful people, especially the corrupt ones, and we know there's plenty of that. But she does it. One of the corrupt things and one of the criticisms I've had is, why is the Kansas City Sports Commission and Foundation in charge of the Chiefs parade? How does the mayor get off not being in charge? How does the city hall not be in charge? How are the police department not involved? How are the Kansas City Chiefs ultimately at the top of the food chain in this town not responsible for the parade? Why? Because the most powerful people in this city deal everything off to a charity and a foundation and throw it on Kathy Nelson's desk. Yeah, Kathy, you're going to be responsible for the parade. So when there's a mass shooting, who's getting sued? Not the Chiefs, not the police, not the mayor, not City Hall. Oh, the Sports Commission and Foundation. This looks like a really decent lawsuit to me, except for who they're targeting. If I'm on this jury, I immediately say, why are you suing the Sports Commission? Why aren't you suing the Chiefs or the police department or the mayor or City Hall? Why aren't you suing another entity? Why the Sports Commission? But this is what they're doing. It's unfair. It's unfair to Kathy Nelson. Her team does a great job. Here's what we don't ever want to have, okay? This is just a very basic thing. If anybody's running for office in this town, this is a good thing to say when you're out campaigning. We don't think the Kansas City Sports Commission and Foundation should ever be in charge of our safety and security. What one person on staff do they have with any expertise in public safety? That's an honest question, and that's not a slam. That's not what they are. That's like holding KCMO Talk Radio liable for the shooting at Union Station. It's Pete Mundo's fault. Let's sue KCMO Talk Radio and Mundo in the morning. It's their fault. They told me, he said, you'll have a great time at the parade. Go to the parade. It'll be great. Take your kids. It'll be a wonderful day. The weather looks good. Go celebrate the Chiefs. I'm suing Pete Mundo and KCMO Talk Radio because he talked me into going to the parade. What? Doesn't know anything about safety and security around Union Station. One really good lawsuit has been settled. It's one. Chris Hernandez won. He's a hero. He's a whistleblower. He was a great journalist. I'm so proud of him and proud of my generation and the people that worked at Channel 4 back in the day. And Kathy Nelson has done great things with the Sports Commission and Foundation, but suing that entity because you got shot at a Chiefs parade is completely disgusting. And it's not her fault. It's not the Sports Commission's fault. It really isn't the victim's fault. The fault is City Hall, the Kansas City Chiefs, pushing everything over here. The Sports Commission has this, so we don't have to deal with these things. People in power are sick. They really are. They're brutal in the way that they will just use other people and entities to take care of themselves, whether it's financially or whether it's to get them off the hook for liability in case something bad happens. The Chiefs in Kansas City, Missouri should be ashamed that this lawsuit is coming to the Sports Commission and not to them. 913-408-7957 is our phone number. If you'd like to chime in on that, I'd love to hear from you. Love to hear your thoughts. 913-408-7957. This is Uncanceled from the desert. We're with the Royals. We'll talk about some of that later on KCMO Talk Radio. Oh, I know everybody feels terrible for me being at Royal Spring Training. It's going to rain tomorrow, they say, in Phoenix, which never happens. So that'll be a good stay-at-home day and figure things out. It's going to be rainy. Well, you know what? The forecast is 90%. I'll believe it when I see it. A rainy day in Phoenix, I'll believe it when I see it. We'll talk a little Royals baseball coming up a little bit later. Not specific X's and O's, but a little bit about spring training, what it's like down here, and if you ever visit the area or want to go to Royal Spring Training. We went to the game. The tickets were $8 last night. $8. Just an unbelievable value. There's plenty of things in Phoenix that are not of value or value-oriented, but spring training games can be. Not all stadiums, but certainly where the Royals play and the Rangers. Most nights you can get a lawn seat out there for $8. It's just a tremendous value and a whole lot of fun. All right, let's go to the phones. We got Leonard and Shawnee ready to go today. Good morning, Leonard. You're on Uncanceled. This is KCMO Talk Radio. What's on your mind today?
Hey, not much, Keith. You know, the operating board, I think you've been talking about, especially the last few weeks, is accountability. And with this transgender mice story, you know, the media, they just keep on putting sugar in their gas tank. And I don't think they realize that when they do stuff like this and when they go against Trump and they try to take him to court and all that kind of stuff, it just emboldens and empowers him more. And look at what he's went through. Of course, there's been tons of stuff, but like in Butler, Pennsylvania, when he was there with his fist in the air high saying, fight, 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 donning a United States of America flag, that should be on every history book in America, in every civics book, because that's the person that right now is forging this and making us a better country.
Well, I think he's got 4 years to do that. He's certainly going to work on education, and he sounds like he's going to be doing a lot of things with education for diverting funds to the states instead of sending them directly to the schools. It looks like an interesting plan that he's got, and I know that I've heard him say many times that civics is one of the things he wants to do, reading, math, science, things like that, but certainly civics and patriotism. You know, we should be teaching constitutional classes at the junior high and high school level. We should be teaching classes about personal finance. There's a lot of things that – this is really big picture, Leonard, but I think you're probably going to agree with me, okay? We know what Democrats want to do. We know that they want to control the population of the country and have control and tell you what you can and can't do. They hate the Constitution because it limits their ability to do that. It happens in other countries because they don't have a Constitution like ours. But if you take it in a smaller view – and you look at education, think it and ask yourself, why don't we teach kids better things in school, like personal finance, like Constitution, patriotism? Why don't we teach those things? Because when they learn those things and believe those things, they are way less likely to vote for Democrats. Democrats like keeping people poor. They like keeping them down. They love them being in debt and beholden to the government. That's their game, and education is a big part of that.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And they want to get their narrative across. And, you know, look at the education department. We'll see how that works out. Put her out of a job. But I want to say one real quick thing in closing here, Keith. Okay, you know, I was always wondering about this, and I wanted to get your opinion. If it came down to a debate between Trump and Reagan, and it was just down to them, and they had the primary, because we remember what Reagan did when he stood up and said, I paid for this microwave, and stared at Bush. And, of course, Jeb repeated it. So they'd go back and forth. But who do you think would win in a one-on-one debate? And if it was a ballroom fight, of course, Reagan would take him. This
is the easiest answer ever, and it sounds like a cop-out. In the 1980s, Reagan, 2025, Trump. I just don't think there's any question. It's the generations, and thank you, Leonard, for the call, man. I always love when you call the show. Appreciate your support. There's, two generations we're talking about here. Entirely different situations. Reagan had a soft touch about him, and you needed that at that time. America was in the same spot after Jimmy Carter that it is right now after Joe Biden. But the fear of Reagan, the one drawback that they talked about Reagan was, is he going to start World War III because of a nuclear war? That's where he and Trump are the same. They followed similar presidents, and they both are, well, there's no reason. They couldn't play the warmonger thing on Trump this time because he spent 4 years as president, and he got us out of everything. He's the only guy that never started one, and he's campaigning on peace, and people believe it. So there's a little difference right there, but people were afraid that Reagan was going to, set off a nuclear bomb and start a war or whatever. Once he had calmed that down, and remember, he was an actor, and he was a much calmer personality than Donald Trump, it became a healing for the country, almost like a wound would slowly heal over time. Donald Trump is swinging a sledgehammer. I don't think America wanted the sledgehammer in 1980, although they might have. They might have looked at a guy like Trump and said, you know what, he's going to bomb the living daylights out of Iran because those hostages have been over there for so long. Maybe he'll do that. I don't know. But Trump doesn't really want to do that because he could do that now. He's got hostages now. And he really, he put out another post yesterday about getting them out and threatening and this and that. And we're going to supply Israel with everything. But he himself is not threatening to do anything. It is very clear that the last thing Donald Trump wants to do is attack anyone or anything with our people or our drones or whatever it is that we use. He doesn't want to. But I think the simple answer is time and place matters. Reagan would have won the debate and won the presidency in the 80s. And if Reagan were a primary challenger right now to Donald Trump, he wouldn't have won. There's just never been support in our lifetime for any candidate on the Republican side like there is for Donald Trump. Barack Obama had it on the left. There were people on the left that just thought he was the greatest thing ever, and they would do anything for him. That's what we have in Donald Trump. A certain section of the electorate will do anything for Donald J. Trump. All right, this is Uncanceled. We're going to be back with more. I'm Kevin Keatsman. You're listening to 95.7 KCMO Talk Radio. Great to have you with us. Thanks so much for listening to KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. We are in the desert with the Royals. We'll talk a little spring training in a bit, but let's spend a moment or two here talking about media and the ever-changing landscape of media and coverage. And this is a direct, it's the wake behind the Trump ship, basically. So everybody laughed and mocked Gavin Newsom for starting a podcast. I get it. It's like, okay, what's he going to do? He wants to run for president, obviously, in 2028. So he has to figure out right now, while he's not running, what works and what doesn't work. What doesn't work for him, he knows. A lot of his record in California does not work for him. But I will warn you, the man is great at making it sound like all the things that have failed there didn't fail. He is really, really good at this. Having a podcast, he will sharpen his skills, and it's easy to see what he's going to do with it. He had Charlie Kirk on. Charlie Kirk is a conservative, and his group does all kinds of great things on college campuses with young people. He's based here in the Phoenix area, and young people really love Charlie Kirk. You probably know who he is. And he has him on as a guest, and he's sitting there talking to Charlie Kirk, and he totally puts him at ease, and you can just see Kirk falling right into the trap. This is unbelievable. Gavin Newsom comes up with this story about we're sitting here together today, and it was all I could do to keep my son from being here. He was going to bed last night. I said, son, you got to go to bed. You got school tomorrow. He goes, I don't want to go to school. I want to meet Charlie Kirk. He's got a 13-year-old son. Now, I don't believe Gavin Newsom, but Charlie Kirk did, and that scares me a little bit because Newsom's sitting there right in front of him saying, yeah, Charlie Kirk, he sees your stuff and is curious, and he goes, it's got me a little worried, and, I need to find out why this is all happening and why Donald Trump won and why the Republicans are gaining so much momentum. I need to figure this out, and I'm learning some of it through my son who's learning it from you. And I'm thinking to myself, only because I know interviewing and I know media and I don't trust people on the left, this sounds like a bunch of hooey. But Charlie Kirk didn't think it was hooey, and he was sitting there. Maybe we should defer to him. He thought it was legit, and he goes, I'd love to meet him. We're going to have him to Tampa. We've got an event next year. He should come down to Tampa. It's going to be a bunch of young Republicans. He'll learn a lot, this and that. And Newsom's like, well, I don't know if I want him to go that far, or something like that. I bring this up because I see so many people on the left right now kowtowing to Trump. We didn't really see it in that speech Tuesday night by the Democrats there, but those are elected officials that are from very liberal areas that wanted their base voters to know that they're down for the cause. They hate Trump, this or that. Gavin Newsom can't be that person. If he wants to run for president, anybody that wants to run for president, you can't get kicked out of that speech, pounding your cane, interrupting the president. That's not going to do it. It's going to take somebody on the left that is a moderate, somebody that convinces America, I'm not that old party. I'm the new party. Barack Obama did it successfully. He was lying. We know that. I knew it at the time, but many people didn't. This can work. I'm not sitting here endorsing Gavin Newsom or saying he's the guy, although I can't identify anybody in that party that would beat him, really, in primaries or debates or the way he looks or the way he sounds. He has one of those things that Quentin Lucas has when he comes on with Pete. There are so many times that Quentin Lucas can sound like he's almost conservative. He was talking about it today right here on KCMO Talk Radio. He said it's too East Coast or too urban-centered, that the Democrat Party is too much about elites in the big cities on the coasts. And it needs to be more flyover country. They need to find people here and get them involved and in some of these causes. And Quentin Lucas is right when he says that. Does that mean he's moving toward the middle? I don't know. I think I would if I were him, if I were going to stay in Missouri, even if I were going to be a congressman and take Cleaver's job someday. I think I'd want to be a little more conservative right here in this part of the country than most Democrats are. But Newsom has that skill, and we're watching these people do that. Stephen Colbert's monologue on The Late Show, which nobody watches. I'll cede that point to you. Nobody really watches that show anymore. But Stephen Colbert came out, and he was making Democrat jokes about how silly they were. And then he pulled out his own paddle. I forget exactly what it said. It basically said, do something. Shut up and do something. Like instead of your little pity paddles that you held up about Elon Musk, How about you actually do something as a Democrat representative? The part that Colbert and the people in the bubble miss is there's nothing for them to do. The things that they want to do, Americans don't like. You just did them all for 4 years. Colbert's telling these people to do something. They just did all of it for 4 years. And America just flipped the middle finger in the air at all of them and said, we're not doing this anymore. We don't like your policies. The Democrats need to reconsider their policies if they want to win. They need to get in line and say, you know what? Trump did this, and Trump can't run again. You can go run now as a Democrat and say, you know what? He did this and this and this that were pretty good. We applaud him for that. And give yourself some balance and get people's minds to be open, because right now everybody in the middle is voting Republican. They're not even considering voting for Democrats. They see the Republicans as the party of common sense, and they see the Democrats as extreme and basically un-American. That's the only way you can explain low ratings. ABC News is laying off 200 people. ABC News laying off 200. We freaked out in Kansas City over 100 people. ABC News is 200. Nobody knows this story. You don't hear the Democrats on the left. What about Channel 9? Maybe they should do a story about ABC News laying people off. I'm sure they did plenty about the IRS people in Kansas City. Why not their fellow journalists getting axed by the company that owns their network? The most beautiful part of all this, as these media giants are toppling because they've been in the wrong lane, they don't drive in the lane most Americans do. They're trying to force stuff down our throats that we are uninterested in. We don't want to change. We like the Constitution. You know, everybody says you got to evolve your whole life. You got to change. You got to be progressive. Well, in certain things, I eat more things now, different things now than I did 30 years ago. I've evolved. I think I've evolved in many ways. I've not evolved away from the Constitution or my country. I've not evolved away from what's right and wrong. Those are things that don't change. Those are timeless standards. Timeless American standards is what those are. ABC News bucked all those trends. They went crazy. They're firing 200 more people because they're not making any money. They affiliated with a man named Nate Silver. You may remember Nate Silver's name. Nate Silver was at one time by Democrats. Well, all of D.C., but mostly Democrats. The Swamp loved Nate Silver. They're like, he's the smartest guy there is. He's not just a polling guru. He's a math guru. He will give you the percentage chance that so-and-so wins the election. We'll have all these live needles and all this stuff. Nate Silver was the man. He was, well, you know, Fauci. When Fauci said, we are science, Nate Silver was the kind of guy that says, I am politics. I've polled everybody. I know who's going to win by how many, and I can tell you right now. And they all believed it. And he started something called 538.com, and it was their Bible. It was everything, especially to Democrats, but Republicans watched it too. Everybody was told this is the smartest guy, and he knows everything. Until Trump came down the escalator and threw a giant wrench in 538. Polling was no longer accurate. Trump voters lied to pollers on purpose. If a pollster calls you, lie to him. Do it. Mess with the polls. They're not good for America. Polling is not good for anything. It's fun to talk about, and I talk about it on the show. It's entertaining. But let them just be wrong. As they say, let them pound sand or eat cake or whatever. So he starts 538, and then ABC decides they're going to acquire this entity. So they're the only ones that can use it, and the other networks can't. So they get it. They think they've got this big acquisition. Big leftist acquisition, 538.com. 2 years ago, Nate Silver leaves 538 because it's owned by ABC. There's nothing for him to do now. I suspect he made tens of millions of dollars, if not more. And after 2 years of ownership, ABC News, with its 200 people laid off, is closing 538.com. It's over. It's toast. It's dead. This is the wake behind the Trump ship. He is crushing and killing Democrat institutions in America like we've never, ever seen before. And I know that's his line. And he says it over and over. He says it so much it doesn't sound believable when he says it. But trust me, the things that are falling by the wayside right now are epic. They're voluminous. We've lost track. There are so many of these things. Tuesday night, Trump's speech, he mentioned that we spent $8 million. DOGE found $8 million that we spent to do transgender experimentation on mice. Immediately after the speech, CNN comes on. Fact check. We got to fact check. You have to, like the old school deal is, speech happened, we got to fact check immediately. Debate happened, fact check immediately. Here's the problem. They haven't figured out yet that Trump isn't stupid. They still think he's stupid. If he said we spent $8 million on mice research for transgender surgery, you better believe it's true. Because what kind of crazy whopper would that be on a speech like this? He would have left, if this were wrong, he would have left himself open to the entire rest of the speech not being heard and not resonating and completely discredited. Because they'd say, he lied to you about the mice, he lied about everything else. So CNN immediately fact checks him and says, this is not true. We did not spend $8 million on mice. In fact, the very next day, CNN has to correct itself. CNN fact checked CNN. They took it back. We did indeed spend $8 million carving up mice trying to swap their genders. It's insane. Why they haven't learned, and I don't understand this. Again, when we talk about getting better in life, when I was younger, I wanted to jump on a story so fast. All of my bosses said, wait, Kevin, that's not ready yet. Hold it. Not yet. And I didn't understand it. And I was like, I've got this. Let's go with it. Repeatedly, they would save me from doing something wrong because as a young reporter, they'd make me wait before we could put it on the air. And that was valuable to learn. I'll hold things now like crazy. You got to get it right. Why can't CNN, if they see that in that speech and they all agree, that doesn't sound right. Does it not occur to anybody at the table to say, well, wait, maybe we don't know that story. Maybe we just don't know. How can we fact check something we don't know about? That's a new one. That was brand new information to everybody. And it was brand new information to CNN. How do you fact check and say this isn't true if you've never heard the story? And wouldn't you give the president of the United States at that moment the benefit of the doubt? And if you find out the next day, or I don't care, 3 days later, you can prove that that's false, that he made it up and lied, that becomes a great story that day too. You haven't lost your story. They're learning a valuable lesson on the left, the way they operate media. The biggest frustration I hear from conservatives is Fox News isn't what we want it to be. It's not conservative enough. They screwed up the 2020 election in Arizona. They called Arizona before everybody else. They're not on the right side. Well, they got Arizona right, so they didn't blow it. They were the first. They didn't have to retract it or apologize. They've made mistakes. They had a Tucker Carlson lawsuit they had to settle because of things that he said about voting machines and whatnot. They've had their problems, but Fox is probably the one entity that will wait the longest. It is remarkable how many times you will watch Fox News and see a story in prime time that is a day and a half old that they're talking about. They'll be like, oh, I saw that on X yesterday. I'm watching at 9 o'clock at night, and that story was 9 o'clock yesterday morning. I saw that on X. And they wait, and they vetted it, and they make sure it's true. And then they bring it to people. That's a reasonable thing to do, I think, if you're one of those big, powerful networks that's been around. But they don't seem to be doing it at the leftist ones, and they're all paying the price. And there's example after example. And who maybe is figuring it out before the media? Is it Gavin Newsom and his podcast? I don't know. I can't tell you what Gavin Newsom's going to be. He's the kind of politician that scares me because he very easily can sound like a Republican. And he is a very smooth debater. And I've watched him repeatedly defend the terrible things that have happened in California, and he actually makes it sound like it didn't happen. I don't know how he does it, but he does it. He's ahead of the curve compared to the media on the left. They are failing all over the place. 913-408-7957 if you'd like to join us. You're listening to Uncanceled on KCMO Talk Radio. Welcome back to the show. The Dan Bongino Show is coming up at 11. Stick around for that one. We've got a post from Donald Trump here this morning about tariffs in Mexico. It's rare that you see a sweet tweet, I guess we'll call it. This isn't a tweet, it's from Truth Social. Trump posts, after speaking with President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico, I've agreed that Mexico will not be required to pay tariffs on anything that falls under the USMCA agreement. This agreement is until April 2nd. I did this as an accommodation and out of respect for President Sheinbaum. Our relationship has been a very good one, And we are working hard together on the border, both in terms of stopping illegal aliens from entering the United States and likewise stopping fentanyl. Thank you to President Sheinbaum for your hard work and cooperation. How about that? Please the man and get the shout out. Love that one. Way to go. Sounds like Mexico's on board with helping out. Let's get Canada whipped into shape. Make Canada great again, baby. Let's do this. We got our man Mark back in studio. Mark, I was at spring training last night. I know you were probably a little bit jealous. You love baseball. And you had the Royals played the Mariners. You have a favorite Mariners player, correct?
Yes, I was born in Seattle, so the Mariners are my second favorite team. So I love Julio Rodriguez. He's my second favorite player next to Bobby Witt Jr.
Julio hit 2 home runs last night.
Ah, nice.
And he was having a good time out there in center field with the fans. My podcast today is about how bad of a dog parent me and Jessica are. We brought our dog, obviously, with us and called the stadium yesterday to see if he could go sit on the lawn seats. And they didn't answer because it was a night game. They were closed. So I look at the policy online. It said no dogs except service animals. So we don't take him. We arrive at the front gate to buy $8 tickets on the lawn, and it's pup night.
Oh.
There must have been 1,000 dogs.
Hey, at least Jessica got to see some dogs out there.
You have no idea how bad we felt. We couldn't drive home fast enough after 5 innings. He doesn't know.
No.
But we feel terrible.
Yeah.
We just feel terrible that he did not get to go to pup night for the Royals. It was just awful. It was terrible. But anyway, we're out there on the lawn in center field, and some younger people next to us are playing games with Julio Rodriguez, your favorite Mariners player, in center field. And they're like, tap your right thigh if you like blondes, left thigh if you like brunettes. And he was just playing right along, tapping his right thigh, and then he turned around and eventually came over and he threw a ball up and he was talking to people. He couldn't have had more fun. Now, this is also the difference between spring training and the regular season. My advice to anybody listening is if you love baseball and you've never been to spring training, go and take in some games because it is so low-key and laid back. All the kids get autographs. There's balls thrown up everywhere. It's so different than regular season baseball. And your guy, Julio, last night could not have been more entertaining as a center fielder standing out there with the fans.
That's awesome. I will say this for Julio as well. Even during the regular season, if you're out at a Royals game out in center field by the fountains, he'll turn around, he'll give you a wave and everything. You probably won't get the autographs like you would at spring training, but he still has fun out there.
I love the question. Blonde or brunette? That's, I guess, a thing. We saw that at Kauffman Stadium last year where it was a Yankees outfielder. I don't remember who it was. It wasn't Aaron Judge. I forget who it was, but no response. The Yankees were like, nope, we're not taking any bait from any Royals fans here. We just flat blew it on pup night, man. I'm telling you. We still feel bad today. We woke up feeling terrible. Like, I can't love my dog enough today. I feel so bad. Did you see this one, Mark? The Cardinals have a prospect named Jordan Walker. And he's out for a week. He got injured catching a fly ball. Do you know this story?
I don't know. I know Jordan Walker, but I don't know this story yet.
You want to take a guess on how he hurt his knee catching a fly ball?
I'm not sure.
He stepped on a sprinkler head.
Oh. Ouch.
You know, those things are supposed to go way down into the ground. And apparently one was stuck. And it was right up at the top where the turf was. And he stepped on it funny and kind of turned his knee a little bit. He's out for a week. No real damage, but wow, that's something seems avoidable. It seems like the grounds crew ought to be able to check every one of those sprinkler heads before the game starts.
Yeah. I remember when Salvi got hurt walking up the stairs one time. You remember that?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Carrying suitcase.
Yeah, that's a weird way to get hurt. But, yeah, that sprinkler, that's got to be fixed.
George Brett broke a toe one time. Do you remember that? You may not remember this. George Brett, this was the very beginning of cable television. Mm-hmm. And so this would have been the late 80s maybe. And the Cubs were on WGN every day. Mm-hmm. Every day. And Bill Buckner was one of his favorite players to watch hit. And George Brett claimed, George Brett did a lot of partying when he was in his 20s, right? Okay, so but he claimed that he was doing laundry. The Royals were playing a night game that night. And he was doing laundry, ran to the TV to see Buckner hit, and tripped and fell and broke a toe or something. Yeah, it was a bit ankle. He was out for a while.
Oh man.
Salvi did the same kind of thing. You know, Salvi's deal was carrying luggage up. That was right at the beginning of the season a few years ago.
Yeah.
He just got into Kansas City and was carrying all the luggage. I'm like, Salvi, you got $50 million, man. Hire somebody to bring your luggage in, buddy. Do you believe either one of those stories?
That's incredible. John just came in here and said that he remembers Brett hitting a couch or something like that and breaking a toe.
Does John believe the story?
I don't think so.
No, I don't believe either one of them. But that's why we like to talk about them. Baseball stories are the best. Thanks for listening to Uncanceled. Dan Bongino's up next.